First up is Tilly's Boon. Tilly is a gold dwarf located within the High Hall courtyard, locked just beyond a set of heavy oak doors. Upon encountering her, she thinks you're there to kill her, but if you tell her you're not and tell her to make a run for it, she'll actually grant you protection. Now this protection that she grants you is actually Death Ward. When your HP is reduced to 0, instead it remains at 1. A pretty handy condition, especially for honor difficulty. And strangely enough, as you might have noticed, Tilly doesn't exactly look like a gold dwarf, but instead looks like a gnome, but is in fact labeled as a gold dwarf, leading me to believe that this is simply a mis-gnome-r. And next up is Secret Dialogue from Sceleritas Fell. While playing as the Dark Urge and approaching the Temple of Baal, if you wear the gibbous of the Worshipful Servant, which is the exact hat that Sceleritas is wearing, he will comment on it, suggesting that you remove it because it is the hat of a lowly servant. You can respond that the hat stays on, or that a child of Baal does as they please, or agree to remove it. Each response has a unique response from Sceleritas, which is really cool, and it is an interaction that most players probably miss. Now, to get the gibbous of the Worshipful Servant to use in this interaction, you'll need to head to the Devil's Fee. Once there, you can buy the hat from Halsin for a mere 35 gold. However, if you defeat Gortash and read his note before going to the Devil's Fee, you'll have entirely different dialogue, and Halsin will recognize you and give you the hat for free. And next up is War Paint, the secret buff most players missed. War Paint unlocks hidden dialogue options with more than one NPC, and chances are most players did not acquire this hidden buff. To get the War Paint buff, you'll need to head to the Goblin camp. As you arrive at the checkpoint, you'll begin a conversation with Sentinel Olak. I chose the nature dialogue option and then failed it, and then got the dialogue that I needed to wear the war colors in order to pass the checkpoint. Olak then points at a pile of warm dung and says that smearing that across your face ought to do it. If you go through with it, you'll actually gain the condition War Paint, which reads decorated with warg dung. Once you have that condition, along with Speak with Animals, when you talk with Claw and Little Claw, both will have much more friendly conversation with you than if you didn't have the War Paint condition. Little Claw mistakes you for his dad, and Claw likes the way you smell. Whereas without the condition, Little Claw says that if you touch him, he'll bleed you out, and Claw says he wants to eat your giblets. And next up is Minthara's Secret Poisonous Kiss, unlockable only once you're in Act 3. You'll need, of course, to keep Minthara alive in both Act 1 and Act 2, and have her join your party in Act 2 and do some very specific things. First, you'll need to increase her approval as much as you possibly can, because Minthara's Poisonous Kiss can only occur once you've romanced her. So as you get her approval up, you'll need to select certain dialogue options once you kill Ketheric, and then officially begin your romance with her at the end of Act 2. Once you arrive in Act 3, then you will finally gain the option to kiss Minthara. After kissing her repeatedly, there is a random chance that upon kissing her that you will then feel strange. Minthara will admit that she takes small doses of poisons with her meals, and that there may be traces on her lips. This is super rare because not only do you need to save Minthara, you then need to romance her and then kiss her a whole lot, since this is a rare random occurrence to get poisoned from her kiss, meaning it's probably an interaction that most players haven't seen. And it actually reminds me of Baldur's Gate 2, where there was a woman on the side of the road you could kiss and it would instantly kill you. And next up is a secret reward from a random goblin that joins your camp. At the end of Act 1, if you choose to raid the Grove, you can actually get a reward from an NPC called Goblin Brawler. He immediately gives it to you upon talking to you, explaining that he had to cut off the fingers of someone in order to get it from them. And at the end of the dialogue, you see in your inventory an item which is none other than Elfira's loot. It seems poor Elfira just can't catch a break during evil playthroughs. And next up is a secret buff everyone missed. This buff is called Infectious Greed and is incredibly strong, granting an additional 6d6 piercing damage to all your attacks and granting advantage on your attack rolls against targets marked by Promise of Wealth. The 66 piercing damage is an amazing addition to your damage, and so is occasionally getting advantage. And to acquire Infectious Greed, all you need to do is raise your attitude with Halsin to 100. Once done, you'll automatically get this mysterious buff. However, if you've ever brought a trader to 100 attitude before, you know that this makes them an ally to you, and that is the true reason that you gain Infectious Greed. It's an aura given off by Halsin. So that means you could also just cast Dominate Person on her to gain this condition. Also, Halsin is the only NPC who can cast Promise of Wealth, which gives you advantage, so dominating Halsin is definitely the right way to get the most out of this condition. This can be helpful if there's there's a fight near a waypoint, so you can dominate Halsin and then teleport and immediately have this condition, which could turn the tide for your party. And next up is how to get Halsin to join your party in Act 1. To do this, all you need to do is complete the quest to defend the portal in Act 2, and when you talk with Halsin at camp afterwards, he will offer to join your party. Once you have him in your party, just cast silence on him and then take any Act 1 waypoint, and he won't be able to stop you since he's silenced. This allows you to play out any parts of Act 1 you didn't already complete, and he surprisingly has a lot of dialogue when exploring certain areas, which you wouldn't expect since you're probably not supposed to have him in your party in Act 1. And next up is Caustic Retort. Whenever you take damage, reflect it back at your attacker threefold as acid damage. This is a massive amount of damage, and it is a permanent condition. To get Caustic Retort, you'll need to head to Act 3 and board the Lustrous Lass, the ship that's near the Grey Harbor Docks waypoint. Once there, there's a gilded chest that, when you open, releases a cursed imp. This imp has Caustic Retort, and you'll probably figure out how powerful it is if you have opportunity attacks enabled, since the imp usually triggers them immediately. Once he appears, use Planner Binding on it to make it your ally. Now you'll be able to send the cursed imp in against your enemies, causing it to potentially deal massive damage against high damaging enemies. There's actually a clip online, and I'll show it here, of the cursed imp being used against Answer to deal over 300 damage to him, and Planner Binding can be learned by level 9 bards, clerics, druids, and wizards. And next up is how to easily access the Umbral Gem near the entrance to the Gauntlet of Shar. The Umbral Gem unlocks the door leading deeper into the Gauntlet of Shar and is bound by an arcane lock, preventing the use of knock. Usually the way to pass through is to turn off all the lights to see where it is safe to walk, to progress through the maze and click the Umbral Gem. However, if you simply equip the Boots of Striding, which you can obtain from Minthara, you can cast a concentration spell and walk right through the magic that pushes you back, and then just click the Umbral Gem. That's because Boots of Striding make you unable to be knocked prone or moved against your will while concentrating. Of course, if you've done this before and just know the maze by heart, that works too, but otherwise, these boots offer easy access to the Umbral Gem. And next up is Warlock Greez's brand. Warlock Greez is a goblin in the Shattered Sanctum that can brand you, but he will only give you his brand if Priestess Gut has already been slain. Warlock Greez's brand is in fact the same as Priestess Gut's brand, but it is a rare dialogue having Greez apply it, since most players probably would have gotten branded by Gut already if they had wanted it. The Absolute's brand will give you the branded tag and allow you to progress through dialogue with Gek'Kul, Corsair Greyman, and Lump without a dialogue check. It also unlocks the full potential of a number of items such as the Absolute's Protector, Talisman, and Warboard. And next up, did you know there are 3 spells that you can cast on a target protected by Sanctuary? Sanctuary is meant to ward a target against being targeted by spells or attacks, so being able to still target a creature with Sanctuary comes as a surprise. The 3 spells that can be used on a target with Sanctuary are Thorn Whip, Blight, and Chain Lightning. 2 of those spells can be learned by a wizard at level 7 for Blight and level 11 for Chain Lightning, and a druid can learn Thorn Whip at level 1, giving you some options against targets who use Sanctuary, when you really probably shouldn't even be able to target them. And next up is a hidden dialogue option with Withers, only available if you are a cleric. The first time you speak to Withers as a cleric, you have the option to focus on the divine energy you feel from his presence. If you pass the wisdom check, then you'll discover that Withers has a divine aspect, a reflection of death itself, eternal and inescapable. You then unlock the dialogue option to ask if Withers is a god's chosen, since you just discovered that he is that powerful. Withers responds that he will answer no more questions on that topic, but this dialogue certainly reveals that Withers is far more than meets the eye. And next up is how to easily pass the Gauntlet of Shar. The soft step trial can be completed before ever shedding blood at the altar, which allows you to skip having to deal with the shadows that patrol. Just run through the maze, and once at the end, shed blood at the altar to start the trial. Pick up the orb and teleport back. The self-same trial can be easily won by having all but one party member leave the room, have them unequip all their equipment, and then start the trial. Have the other party members re-enter and join for the trial. You'll be up against a single mirrored enemy with no equipment on, making it a super easy fight. And last, for the Faith Leap trial, surprisingly, starting the trial first actually lets you fly through it using a scroll of fly. Before the trial begins, trying to fly though doesn't work, so it's actually the opposite of the soft step trial. Activate the trial, cast a scroll of flying, and fly to the end to easily pass it. And next up is a hidden reward from using Detect Thoughts. If you talk talk to Booyag Piddle in the Goblin camp, he'll explain he's been reading Volo's book. He'll ask you questions about what certain words mean, and eventually you can ask him for the book. He'll decline, but if you have detect thoughts on, you could read his mind and learn that he wants to write a book about the Absolute since he knows so much about it. Once done, you unlock a new dialogue option recommending he write that book, and he'll drop the book on the ground, letting you pick it up without any trouble. Once you read it, you'll be awarded inspiration for anyone in your party with a sage background, which Gale has, called Secrets of the High Chieftain. And next up is a hidden interaction with Hexblade's Curse. The curse reads, your damage rolls against the target gain a bonus equal to your proficiency bonus. But did you know that this also applies to magic missiles? This means that if you were to upcast Magic Missile using a level 6 spell slot, you'd cast 8 missiles, each gaining your proficiency modifier, which in my case was +4, adding an additional 32 damage. And if your target was a boss with a lot of HP, you could send volley after volley of magic missiles and they would all get this bonus damage, which is huge. And best of all, you only need 1 level in Hexblade Warlock to get Hexblade's Curse, making this subclass amazing for dipping 1 level into. And next up is a secret interaction with Control Undead. In the Gauntlet of Shar, during the self-same trial, you can use Control Undead on your mirrored clones. Instead of taking control of the clone, however, they just instantly die. This is a super easy way to defeat a mirrored clone without doing the cheese where you unequip all your gear before starting the trial. So if you wanted to have a somewhat more legitimate way to easily complete the trial, Control Undead as an Oathbreaker Paladin is the way to go. And next up is a hidden interaction with Bernard. In the Arcane Tower, if you throw Bernard off the tower, he will actually use the elevator to come back up to you. Of course, you might think that it's not intelligent enough to know how to use the elevator, but it does, and it makes him all the more terrifying. However, I did notice that if you throw him off the front of the tower, he seems less able to use the elevators. And I never noticed this before, but when he dies, it actually looks like all the arcane braziers in the tower kind of throw off sparks as he dies, which is kind of interesting. And next up is how to keep Dammon alive even if you slay the Nightsong in Act 2, or anyone in Last Light Inn for that matter. All you need to do is kidnap them from Last Light Inn before you slay the Nightsong. And to do this, just use improvised melee weapon on your target, pick them up, start carrying them, and then right as you're holding them, teleport to a waypoint where it's safe. So for example, the Gauntlet of Shar waypoint works great, and then when Last Light Inn falls to the Shadow Curse, they won't be there to die, and then when you progress to Act 3, they will be there alive and well. This is perfect for characters like Dammon if you want to shop his wares in Act 3, but you want to do an evil playthrough. And next up is a secret dialogue with Lump. If you have a character go invisible and then another character start dialogue, switch back to the invisible character and steal his war horn, then after passing the dialogue check to come to an agreement, he'll begin to offer his horn to you, but then realize that it's been stolen, and he'll even accuse you of stealing it, leading to combat. It's definitely a dialogue option most players probably missed, since you'd have to steal it during dialogue, otherwise he becomes hostile immediately once the horn is stolen.